Hello, YouTube Pipers. Double O Pipe here, aka Rick. I have a cup of coffee, and I'm going to try one of my, I think they call them Lancers. I can't remember now for sure. This is a Bellas Artes AJ Fernandez. Well, that little bugger isn't going to slip off of there at all, so I'm going to have to take it off. Okay. I need to circumcise this thing. Well, let's hope I didn't take too much off. Fill this up again. Definitely need a better lighter than this one. Just isn't gonna last. I thought I'd like this one, but I'm not sure. It's a little stronger than that one yesterday. It's hitting the top of my nose up there, and I'm not appreciating that. Well, let's smoke it down a little bit and see. Picture this. An October night, as the sun has just gone down below the horizon so that the sky is a little bit lit up, but not much. And in front of you, as you're running as fast as you can, there are two figures running and then jumping, running and then jumping. And that's what I was doing. I was running as fast as I could, and I jumped as high as I could and landed on the top of the next car on the train. We were playing Jesse James running across the train top. And I yelled, "Jesse James ain't got nothing on me," as I went up in the air and came down on the next car on the train. Sprinted as hard as I could atop that. And I yelled something else. I said, "You guys wait up for me." And somebody yelled back at me, "Shut up, Croucher." I said, "What's wrong?" I stopped and I hunkered down on the top of this train car, box car. And I saw George up in front of me slide over the side and going down the ladder there. And I crawled over there. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "You didn't see the light come on in the caboose back there?" I said, "Light?" And I looked over and the light was on. So I said, "No." He said, "Well, come on, let's get out of here. We can't stay around here." And we had been running hard on that top of those box cars, just making as much noise as we could. Whoever it was in the caboose, he must have been asleep for a little bit. Well, I slid over the side and climbed down the ladder myself, and he said, "Let's go." And it was me, and there was George, and there was Ivan, another one of my friends who passed away a while back. And Ivan said, "Run, get the hell out of here." So we started running again, jumping over train tracks, going in between trains that were sitting in the yard. We were there, and that train had been sitting still. Don't know when it was going to go. Before we did that, though, I was looking at the lock on. I said, "Hey guys, how would you like to let's get into this thing and go to sleep, and wherever we wake up, we'll get a job." And I started pulling on. I said, "You can't get into this thing." He said, "Let go of that. That's a seal. Get away from there." That was my plan. Let's get in here and go to sleep and see where we wake up. Obviously, you weren't meant to get in there because it was locked, and it definitely had a seal so that they would know that not only had somebody tampered with it, but they had removed it. Anyway, we were running, dodging, passing trains on tracks, and finally we got to the back gate of the County Coastal Fair, the Coastal County Fair, on this October night. And I said, "Boy, wouldn't it have been great to have been running up there with the wind blowing at you and smoke and sparks coming at you, just like Jesse James did back in those days of the 1800s?" They looked at me, and he said, "You know, if you weren't drunk, you wouldn't even be thinking this." I said, "Well, you're probably right." I said, "Speaking of drunk, let's get a beer." I said, "Who's paying?" And Ivan said, "Well, since you mentioned it, I think you should." So I said, "Okay." So we walked up to the beer wagon. George was about a foot, maybe a foot and a half taller than me, and taller than Ivan. Ivan was taller than me. Everybody was taller than me, but even today, everybody's taller than me. But anyway, George always went up there because he looked older than us, and we thought, you know, the guy, he wouldn't sell it to young people, so we'd get it through George. Guy said, "What do you want?" And George says, "3 beers." So we got out 3 beers. I gave George his money. He handed it over to the guy. Started drinking it, looking around, and Ivan says, "What's next?" He said, "Roller coaster, scrambler, Mighty Mouse, Ferris wheel." And I looked at him. I had had an occasion on a Ferris wheel, and I was never getting back on one of those. And I said, "Nope, not me, not the Ferris wheel." They said, "Yep, Ferris wheel it is. Come on." I said, "I'm going back to get another beer. I'm not going on the Ferris wheel." And they called me chicken shit and walked off. Well, I finished the beer I had, and I walked back over to the wagon waiting on them. Figured I might as well get in line. Maybe they'd be back by the time. Shuffled up to the front again, and there I was. And I said, "Hi, remember me?" The guy said, "Yeah, 3 beers, right?" I said, "Okay." I reached in my pocket, got the money, and put it on the counter. And he put the 3 beers on the counter, and I was on my tiptoes trying to get them, and I couldn't figure out how I could carry all 3 and drink mine. And the guy behind me pushed me aside and said, "Get out of the way, I need to get my beer." I said, "I'm trying to get mine." So anyway, on my tiptoes, I got all 3 in my hand, slowly went down on off my tiptoes. The guy in front had paid for his, and was walking off, and he bumped into me as he walked off, and all the beer sloshed all of me. I said, "Watch it, buddy." And he said, "Yeah, you want to make something of it?" I said, "Well, let me drink my beer first, and then maybe." He said, "Okay, go ahead." Now, picture this. I got 3 beers in my hand. I put the I put my lips on the first cup that's facing me, and I tilt it. I'm already drunk. I tilt it. I'm getting the beer out of that one, and my shirt and my pants are getting the beer out of the other 2. So I am soaking wet with beer, reeking of beer smell. The guy who was waiting there to see if I was going to do anything about him moving me out of the way, he started just laughing and laughing. He couldn't stop laughing. And I said, "Yeah, you laugh like a jackass." And I walked off. And as I was walking off, I heard somebody yell, "Ricky, Ricky." And I turned around, and it was a friend that I had just met that year in college. We were both freshmen. His name was Tucker. Lost track of him. Don't know where he's gone. I heard somewhere that he became a librarian. I don't know. Good fella, tightly wound. About my height. Yeah, I think he had blonde hair to my brown. But we were fairly good match size-wise. And he said, "What you doing here?" I said, "Same thing you doing here. What you doing here?" He said, "I've been drinking beer." And I said, "Well, that's what I've been doing too." He said, "Well, you want another one?" I said, "I just had 3." He said, "I was thinking drinking, not spilling." I said, "Okay." So he bought us 2 beers. He was sipping on his, and I just gulped mine down. By that time, I was just pouring them. He said, "How many you need to catch up?" And I said, "Maybe 2 more." He said, "Yeah, okay, I've had 6. How many you had?" I said, "About 4. I'm not sure." So he bought me 2 beers, and I drank those down while he was drinking his. And about that time, the stretch of my bladder got to me, and I felt that, and I said, "Do you know where the can is around here?" He pointed over that way. And as I was running in that direction, I saw Ivan and George coming back to the beer wagon. And I said, "George, Ivan, I want you to meet my friend from college. His name's Tucker. I'll be right back." And I went, did my business, came back. And they said, "You want a beer?" I said, "Sure." You know I want a beer. This was freshman in college. Tucker and I had gone to all the pledge parties and drunk so much free beer together. But they never got us drunk enough to join. So we were, this is real hard to draw. I don't know if maybe the cut that I made wasn't good enough, but it's good enough. It's getting better as it goes along. Okay. So, as I drank this beer down, I think George said to Tucker, "Know any girls that we can meet?" And from that point on, after finishing that beer, I just got bits and pieces of what was going on. Excuse me. And I heard George ask that question. I think Tucker said, "Pleasant house." And they said, "Let's go." So next thing I know, I'm in the back seat of Ivan's Chevrolet station wagon. I think it was a 60. What was the year? 67? I think it was a 67 Chevrolet station wagon. Big old car. And he was roaring down the highway, and I looked out to the right, and telephone posts were going whoo, 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 whoo. And I was kind of trying to figure where I was because I didn't remember getting in the car. So I kind of leaned forward and put my hands on the front seat and tried to pull myself up, sliding on the seat, pull myself up. I said, "Where are we going?" And I heard Pleasant, across the Cooper. And as he was saying it, the wind was taking his words away from me, and I couldn't hear everything he was saying. I said, "Wait, wait." And I looked over at the not the gas gauge, the speedometer. Man, it's bad when you get old. And that speedometer hand was on 80. And all of a sudden, we went bam, and we were going straight up into the air. We were on the Cooper River Bridge. I don't know if any of you ever saw the Cooper River Bridge before they made this fancy new one, but it was like a 2-lane blacktop with handrails on the side. I mean, there was no protection if you went off the side. It was over and gone. And there were 2 humps, and the bridge was 2 miles long. He was doing 80 on this thing. I looked to the right, whoo, whoo, whoo. There were cars going past us. I said, I could lace across this seat and not touch either door with any part of my body. I said, this car is wide. He said, yeah, it is. I mean, I figured it was so wide that it was over the white line on the other side. And it just scared the hell out of me. And all of a sudden, I just kind of, everything went dark. And I slid back in the seat, I'm sure, because when I opened my eyes, the car was parked and we were in somebody's driveway. And I looked around and I was out again. Next thing I knew, Ivan was saying, "Croucher." And I went, "Huh? Croucher? Huh? We're at your house. Get out." I said, "Huh? What time is it?" He said, "The sun's coming up." I said, "Oh, no." So got out of the car and I was going in the door. He backed out and tore down the highway, screaming rubber across the street. And as I was opening the door, the paper boy came in and threw the paper and hit me whack on the back of the head. And that's when the hangover started. Man, I heard that they went to Tucker took them to a girl's house. I think her name was Margaret. I don't know, what went on. But I knew her from college, and she was a nice girl, so they probably just went in there and chatted. Lord have mercy. $80. If you ever get a chance, look up the Cooper River Bridge and see what it looked like. Like I say, it was like a 2-lane blacktop with a stripe down the middle. Straight up, straight down, curve, straight up, straight down. I'm surprised we made it across. I've never seen anybody do 80 across that thing. Made a big impression on me. Well, like I say, I don't know what happened to Tucker. Last I heard, he was in Washington State somewhere. He had I wouldn't say a run-in, but he had We had been in town, gone to a place run by the boss that I had during the summer. It was called The Brick. He and I went there to have a few drinks. And I was talking to some girl, and the boss came over to me and said, "I want you to come outside with me." I said, "Okay." He said, "Is that your friend?" Tucker was running across the cars on the hoods, back and forth. He said, "I want you to get him in your car and take him away from here, and don't ever bring him back. Matter of fact, don't ever you come back." So I took him to a friend's house there in town. He said that's where he would like to go. And I walked him up to the door, said, "You gonna be okay now?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna be fine." So anyway, I turned around and started walking back to the car. Next thing I know, the door behind me slams. And I look back there, and it's Tucker. He's running down the road just screaming. That's the last I saw Tucker. Come to find out that that friend of his that he never suspected made a pass at him. That just did not sit well with Tucker at all. That was something completely new to me, that a guy made a pass at a guy. I had never heard, well, I'd heard of it, but I'd never seen it before. And obviously Tucker didn't approve either. So, but Ivan passed on, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And George just passed on a few months ago. But that was one of our adventures. We had another one that caused me to break up with the girl that I should have stayed with all my life. I have regretted that ever since, but I was just too stupid to know what I had. I think you guys this is a little harsh at the back of the throat. I wouldn't dare try to retrohale this. And I don't know if the darkness is true. I guess I'll find that out, whether it's a lot of nicotine or not. I like the size of it. I mean, I don't feel like my jaw is going to unhinge trying to put it between my teeth. And it's flattened out. I guess you can see that. See how they flatten that one out? Maybe that also makes it easier to put between your teeth. I forgot. I remember that when we got our beer that first time, I quoted a poem. "I think that I shall never hear a poem lovelier than beer. That stuff they pour on tap. Wait a minute, that stuff they pour on tap with golden base and snowy cap. The stuff that I drink all day until my memory melts away. Poems are made by fools I fear, but only Budweiser can make a beer." Something like that. We all ended up on those first two, or those last two lines, and just laughed. We thought that was so funny. Of course, we we thought we were the generation. I can think of one more thing that George and I did. I'll have to think about that a while because I'm not sure exactly. Anyway, anybody that's going to join the giveaway, please join soon. You got till the 15th. That's a Sunday. So think about it. Give us a story. So we can get somebody to get a certificate through the mail. All right. It's been fun. I've enjoyed yakking about myself again. Take care of yourself. God bless. Till the next time. Bye-bye.